Shams. I'm a grad student at ITU. This is our first session for today in this hall. And the topic of the session is choosing friends, Pakistan in the Middle East. As we all know, with the recent chain of events in the Middle East, Pakistan faces difficult foreign policy choices in the region. Our distinguished panel will help us understand how Pakistan should treat the water with caution to avoid tangling in a quagmire. On the panel we have Lieutenant General Waheed, Arshad retired, who is a former Chief of General Staff at GHQ from 2010 to 2013. Also he was a DG ISPR in 2007 basically. And then we have Ambassador Asif Durrani, who was a former Ambassador of Pakistan to Iran and the United Arab Emirates. And Ambassador Ashraf Qazi, who is not here but he will join us in a while. He was a former UN representative for Iran and Sudan, and he was also a former ambassador to the United States, India, and China. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, that's fine. And our last guest is Dr. Barnett, Rubin, who is a senior fellow and associate director of Center on International Cooperation at New York University, where he directs the Afghanistan-Pakistan regional program. Previously, he was a senior advisor to U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. This session will be moderated by Mosharraf, Zaidi, who is a distinguished columnist, analyst, and a senior fellow at Tabadlab. He also served as a policy advisor to Ministry of Foreign Affairs between 2011 and 2013. So give him a big round of applause and over to you, Mosharraf.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome everyone. First I want to thank Shams for that introduction and thank the organizers of Tabadlab ThinkFest2020 for yet again arranging such a fantastic set of events and conversations. I'm personally greatly privileged to be on the stage, currently 3 and soon to be 4. We had a panelist who dropped out at the last minute. About 20 minutes ago I received an email from Naseem Zeta, and she apologizes to all of you, and she was apologizing to me, and I told her she doesn't need to apologize to me because I get to see her off and on anyway, but you know, the audience would have really benefited from her insights and her wisdom about these issues. I wanted to just ask if it would be okay if we took a moment of silence for the victims of the terrorist attack in Quetta yesterday, as well as lending our thoughts and prayers and du'as for the victims of the Iranian plane that was taken down day before yesterday. So if you'll indulge me, maybe a 10 to 15 second moment of silence where we can pray, think, whatever your politics are, you're welcome to it. Okay, since that silence was interrupted anyway, I thought we'd kick things off. First of all, thanks again for your patience because we're starting a little bit late. I'm not going to reintroduce the panel, but I wanted to start by actually allowing panelists to maybe take a very quick stab at who they are pro. Because actually the whole conversation in Pakistan is, are you pro-Saudi or are you pro-Iran? And so I'm going to ask the panelists just a very quick 1 or 2 words, and if you don't want to answer or you don't want to share it with the audience, you can say that too. But let's begin with, are you pro-Iran or pro-Saudi? Let's start with you, Barney, since you're the guest.
I certainly,
Closer to you.
I actually have had very close personal relationships with senior officials in both Saudi Arabia and in Iran. To some extent I still do, but I cannot say that I'm pro-Saudi for many reasons, but most of all because they murdered a close friend of mine who's also Saudi, of course, Jamal Khashoggi. But he's just as Saudi as the people who murdered him, and maybe more so. So I don't know whether should we say more pro or anti-Saudi. As far as Iran is concerned, you know, of course, there has been this antagonism between the United States and Iran going back to when the United States overthrew the Mossadegh government in 1953, the Iranian Revolution, which was in many respects a reaction to that. I think that unfortunately that's distorted the relations between the two countries terribly, because we have so many interests in common if we simply look at it from the point of view of national interest. And occasionally that has broken through the ideological conflicts, particularly in the area that I've worked on the most in Afghanistan, and that is part of the reasons that I have had many cooperative relationships with Iranian counterparts over the years because of work on Afghanistan. My view on the Saudi-Iran conflict is that I'm not in favor of the United States taking sides, and I'm not in favor of Pakistan taking sides. I'm in favor of support for a security dialogue in the Persian Gulf, which is the historic name of the area, actually.
Okay, so clearly throw it on because he's referencing the Persian Gulf instead of the GCC. General Saab, what is your take? I'm looking for a much shorter answer than Barney because then I have follow-up questions that I want to.
I'll give you a short answer. I am pro-Pakistan. And that means that I can be pro-Iranian if you shoot me, and I can be pro-Saudi if you shoot me. So it's not for your own national interest. What do you want to do? Basically, you are supposed to be pro your own country. And if your interest drive you to a certain direction, you do that. If you don't, then you do not.
Ambassador Durrani, you don't get to repeat what General Saab said, just for the sake of civilian supremacy. So.
Hello. Well, I'm pro-engagement. So it means that I have to engage both Iran and Saudi Arabia. Iran is a direct neighbor. And in Saudi Arabia, we have vested interest with almost 2.5 million Pakistanis working. There's also some emotional attachment. But that doesn't mean that we'll have to sacrifice our national interests. So that's why positive engagement suits Pakistan more than, say, we display neutrality. I can explain positive engagement, but once we get on track.
Fantastic. Let's turn this now to the lens. I mean, those are all three are great answers. I choose which country I'm supportive of based on the weather and the day of the week, so I'm not quite sure yet because it's early in the day, but I will make up my mind based on the discussion. Barney, again, I'm going to start with you. You've had this, so a lot of people wouldn't know this, but when Barney was showing off about how many officials he knows in Saudi Arabia and Iran, what he left out is how many officials he's known in Pakistan and for how long. Barney's been a regular visitor and is one of the world's foremost scholars on the Afghan conflict, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the post-Soviet invasion era, the Taliban era, the post-2001 era. He's also been in government, in and out of government. He's advised Richard Holbrooke and the Obama administration. So he really has a front row seat, and sometimes he's actually been in the mix in terms of shaping at least US policy, but also helping shape other policymakers all around the world and how they think about this. He visits China frequently. I'm giving this whole bio data because you should understand where the gentleman is coming from. So with that context, Barney, how would you judge, you alluded to it a little bit, I want you to go into a little more detail about your view of the role that these two great powers in the Middle East have played, specifically in Afghanistan. Forget about the relationship with Pakistan for a second. What has been the role that they've played in Afghanistan?
Well,
just a bit closer now so that everybody.
Okay. Well, in recent years, I suppose, let's put the emphasis on since 2001, since we don't want to go back too far. And since 2000,
That's just you pretending to be young.
I would not pretend that. My job at this point is to let you know all how old I am and for you all to tell me that I look young. Sometimes it works. I personally was witness to very close cooperation between the United States and Iran, and together with Russia, India, and others at the Bonn talks in 2001. I participated in that. Of course, while there's a lot of focus and maybe focus is not the right word, there's a lot of rhetoric coming from the U.S. government about Iran's malign regional activities. That all concerns, that is malign from the point of view of the United States and Israel. That all concerns and Saudi Arabia, Iran's activities on its western borders. And actually, that is to say, primarily in the Arab world, obviously, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, etc., Syria. But in fact, on Iran's eastern borders, the United States and Iran have had relatively compatible national interests and quietly cooperated. And in fact, the Iranians, sometimes I've had Iranians complain to me that the United States doesn't appreciate how much Iran has contributed to the stabilization of Afghanistan, but by not doing so many things that it could do, which certain other neighboring countries do from time to time.
But which Iran does in Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq,
yes,
Pakistan,
yes,
among many others.
Yes. Well, I think that the core, in my view, the core of the problem there is the deep conflict between the United States and Iran, and particularly Iran's belief, which is not without foundation, that the United States wants to overthrow the Islamic Republic and put in place a different system. And so a lot of Iran's activities of this sort are, which are very perceived as and experienced as aggressive and destabilizing by many others from Iran's point of view, are measures of self-defense and attempts to set up a system of I'm sorry, my jet lag is measures of self-defense and attempts to set up a system of I'm sorry, my jet lag is measures of self-defense and attempts to set up a system of I'm sorry, my jet lag is measures of self-defense and attempts to set up a system of I'm sorry, my jet lag is measures of self-defense and attempts to set up a system of I'm sorry, my jet lag is measures of self-defense and attempts to set up a system of my jet lag is defense and attempts to set up a system of my jet lag is defense and attempts to set up a system of my jet lag is defense and attempts to set up a system of my jet lag is defense and attempts to set up a system of my jet lag is defense and attempts to set up a system of my jet lag is defense and attempts to set up a system of my judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system of my judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system of my judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system of my judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system of my judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system of my judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system. My judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system. My judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system. My judgment is offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. Offense and against an attempt to set up a system. 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 against an attempt to set up a system 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 set up a system
Qasem Soleimani. International law surely must apply to Qasem Soleimani and the Al-Quds brigades. International law should apply to the financing of terrorist activities and militias and insurgencies in 6 countries. Iran has been spreading terror and dissension in Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. So I'm confused as to what the condemnation of Pakistan's role, which doesn't support any of these things, whereas Qasem Soleimani, the dearly departed general, and the Al-Quds and IRGC have been actively recruiting militias from Pakistan. They've been taking Pakistani citizens and radicalizing them and sending them to war in Syria and many other places. So I wonder what your response to that would be.
Okay, I'll respond to that. There are no good guys in this particular drama. But when it comes to Iran's role in media itself, Iran has not attacked any country. Iran has, right from the beginning, and here, let me if you give me a minute or two.
Just 2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. When World War II began, the Americans initially, or their strategists thought the Germans would probably win the war. And they had a grand strategy for the post-war period in which there was a grand area which comprised the Western Hemisphere, that's the whole of the Americas and all, the British Empire, which would be the former British Empire, and the Far East, which would sort of come, which America would sort of inherit in the post-war period. And then and Germany, if it won the war, as initially many American strategists thought, particularly those in either the Council of Foreign Relations or if it had a predecessor, which was planning for what policy would be after the war, Germans would have much of, not the whole of, much of Eurasia, because there would be China and the Germans were stopped at Kursk and Stalingrad. The plan was reviewed, the grand strategy plan, to include control over the resources of the Middle East, which when they came under the US influence and the planning was done, they were described as the greatest gift to the United States that one country could receive in the whole history of international relations, the Middle East, the oil resources of the Middle East. After the war, you had, I don't want to talk about this thing, you had Russia and Britain vying for influence in Iran, the British won, then the national response under Dr. Mossadegh, then you had the CIA coup, and then you had later the Islamic Revolution, Iran-Iraq War, all of these things in which Iran had been targeted precisely because its resources were used for A, the national interests of Iran as Iran saw it, and resisting what they saw as American Western hegemony in the area. And when it came to the nuclear question, the Iranians had always supported the creation of a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East, which was initially an Egyptian proposal, which Iran supported. And as far as the United Nations, the US 16 intelligence agencies and all, they concluded that Iran had stopped developing having a nuclear weapons program. They had begun it, they were on it, but they had stopped. This is according to the intelligence estimates. And yet, the hostility towards Iran continued because Iran challenged the status quo in the Middle East.
By sending terrorists over to like 6, 7 countries.
That's your definition, terrorist.
Well, it's designated by the United Nations. I mean, we can get everybody to clap, but the United Nations has designated these, or Hamas has designated.
Hezbollah is the force that kicked Israel out of Lebanon.
Okay, so we prosecuted Iran, and the pro-Iran camp in the audience is very happy. Now let's switch. Qazi, I want to let other panelists speak as well. So let's switch from Iran. Let's look at Saudi. You very artfully, Barney, very artfully dodged the question of Saudi Arabia before 2001. But I'm gonna bring it back if you don't mind. Look, one of the defining features of the Pakistani experience of radicalization and extremism was the infusion of petrodollars into Pakistani economy and Pakistani madrasas, Pakistani textbooks, and Pakistani society. And the expansion of violent extremist Sunni groups, particularly out of Jung, but then later on throughout the country, is well known, and the attack yesterday in Quetta was a Daesh attack. Pakistan has suffered from the expansionism, whether reactive or not, of the Saudis, just as much as countries like Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria have suffered Iran's expansionism. How would you say, if you were asked to give advice to the Pakistani state, how would you say Pakistan should position itself between these two dear brothers, Persian and Arab, who don't seem to have any lack of appetite for ruining their other brothers?
Well, I mean, first you lift out the fact that there is a joint venture among the United States, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia to support the most radical mujahideen in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. Actually, China is also part of this as well. And that origin of that goes back earlier to when the United States was supporting conservative Gulf monarchies and so on against leftist Arab nationalist regimes in the Middle East. And certainly an Afghan perspective would be that Pakistan, and you're portraying Pakistan as being victimized by Saudi Arabia, which you couldn't make a case for that, but Pakistan's military of that time also partnered with Saudi Arabia, as did the United States, in their project in Afghanistan. And that continued during the period of the Taliban, when the United States was more or less absent. And then when the United States came back in 2001, of course, it came back, although they like to obscure this, on the Iranian side and the Russian side of that conflict. And of course, that has created many of the paradoxes of American policy in Afghanistan since that time, which we have faced and Pakistan has faced. Now, so, excuse me. So in a way, I don't want to just blame Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia was also acting in a strategic space that was created by the Cold War, the United States, Soviet Union, and so on, as was Pakistan. But the way that Saudi Arabia, especially under the regime of King Fahd, and in response to the events of 1979, responded, and Saudi response to the Iranian Revolution, did contribute to the polarization and sectarianization of politics in Pakistan, and also on the other side of Iran as well. So, Saudi Arabia bears considerable responsibility for all of those things. And so, just as what you, in the same way, I don't mean to be wishy-washy, I would just say this, but I would say about the same, similar things in Saudi Arabia and Iran, that, you have articulated a kind of clear anti-Iranian position, and, much of what you say is accurate. On the other hand, Iranians have reasons for doing all of those things, in particular in response to the assault on them and their state by the United States and its allies in the region. So rather than trying to cast blame and responsibility for the overall situation, I would go back to what Qazi Sub said. Was it you who said this? He said that you were pro-engagement. Or that was Durrani. Okay, pro-engagement. And you mentioned, of course, that there is a limit to, right, and there's a limit to what moral and ethic positioning can accomplish for you in politics, because you can take clear positions about acts and events, but not about actors, because there are no good and bad actors. There are good and bad actions.
I think on that note.
Just a second. I think, when we talk about choices, should be Iran or Saudi Arabia, it's basically a false question. What Pakistan needs really to do is to develop its own potential, and try and move away from being a security state to a development state. No, that's important. It's only
in history.
If I may just...
No, but because... No, I just want to ask the question because we want to make it interesting as well. I think, this is a cliche, Pakistan should stand on its own 2 feet. I'm 44 years old, since before I was born. This is what, people like us have been saying.
Even
So-
if it's
no, no, but-
84 years old.
But the fact is that it's not happening. The fact is that in fact
begin to happen.
Pakistan is constant. Did you say it's beginning to happen?
I said it's got to begin to happen. Pakistan is where it is because of the quality of governance it has suffered for its entire life after the departure of Qazi. Pakistan failed to become a development state which gives you much more security than being a security state. Pakistan's options have been minimized because it has become a state with a begging bowl and a dependent state. So if you're an independent state, you don't have to choose. You don't have to choose between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Even though you came in late, Qazi Saab, you've mashallah now spoken the most of all the panelists, and I want to give Jalal Saab a chance to speak as well. Jalal Saab, could you also address this very peculiar Pakistani habit of finding all the region and the world's problems and blaming them on Pakistan as if the agency for all things in the world is actually located in Rawalpindi and Islamabad, obviously more in Rawalpindi.
Actually, Pakistan suffers from the syndrome of self-flagellation. Our problem is, in my view, that we always remain more worried about what is happening in other countries, what is happening to our so-called brotherly countries in the Middle East, our so-called Muslim brethren all over the world. We remain more worried about that. We don't want to remain worried about what's happening to us, ourselves in our own country, what we are doing ourselves to our country. We tend to immediately go into an emotional, reactive mode of things, for example, the recent happening in Iraq. We don't realize, and it's a very interesting fact, that in Iraq, the Al-Quds Brigade and the American forces were co-located. They were actually cooperating with each other against the ISIS. There was an understanding between the American forces and the Iranian forces there in Iraq to target ISIS. It's on record. I don't know why are we getting so emotional about if the Iranians and Americans are fighting in Iraq through their proxies, the Saudis are fighting in the region through their proxies. We want to get sucked into an issue which doesn't directly relate to us in the sense it relates to people in Iraq or Syria or Lebanon or Yemen. And you see here all over the media, everywhere, everybody trying to get emotional, starting from what statement we should give, what statement we should not give. As I said in my initial remarks, I think it is important for us to understand that while we can't remain isolated to what is happening in the region because it affects us directly and indirectly, does not mean either you knee-jerk or you get emotional about taking side and supporting and not supporting. I think the government of Pakistan for the last many years, and I gave you examples of our policy on sending troops to Yemen, or not going to Kuala Lumpur, for example, or not building the Iran pipeline, and many other steps, where the government actually of the day thought that this is the right way to do things, and they had the support of the people to do that. I mean, we don't have to openly take sides all the time, or any time. I mean, one has to understand what is happening, what other countries are doing for their own interests. And we can take this example in Iraq. I mean, you've given the example of Iranians firing missiles in Iraq, but also letting them know 3 hours before they fired that we want to fire missiles on you. So, I mean, let's get very realistic and understand that even the countries which are fighting each other, like the Iranians, the Americans, the Saudis, the Iraqis, the Syrians, the Turks, have their own interests, and a lot of times their interests get synchronized, and a lot of times their interests diverge. And that's the reality. So why should we get so emotional about taking side? We should see what benefits our national interest at a particular time, as I said earlier, how the situation evolves, and I think we need to be very pragmatic and realistic about it. Yes, the Iranian Saudis have been fighting the sectarian wars in Pakistan and so many other places. But that does, and I think the credit goes to this country and its leadership that the country has not degenerated into the kind of sectarian strife which we see in Iraq and Syria and other places in the Middle East. I think the credit goes to the people and the leadership of this country. Otherwise, a lot of efforts are made to destabilize this country, but I think that the people of the country are strong, they understand what is happening. So I think we need to be very realistic about it and approach the conflict and the demands on Pakistan through a very pragmatic and realistic prism, rather than through the prism of religion or through the prism of emotion.
Thank you, Zaidi. It's particularly nice to hear such a measured take on things from somebody who served in our forces. In recent years, it's getting harder and harder to find such sober and calm assessment of the situation. Durrani, I'll come to you. Barney, I'll let you finish, but Durrani, I wanted to frame this question for you. You know, Jahangir just said that, alhamdulillah, and I agree with him, you know, Pakistan didn't become Syria, didn't become Iraq. There were times where it felt like that's where we were headed, especially back in 2009, 2010, 2011. But the brunt of the assault and the brunt of the victimhood of that process of avoiding becoming that was borne by the Shias of Pakistan. And I think that, I don't think is a sectarian statement, it's a statement of fact in terms of the assessment. If you look at sectarian killings, targeted killings, you look at what took place with what happened to the Hazaras. It was January 13th, it is January 13th, the day after tomorrow. It's exactly, I believe, 7 years since the massacre at Alamdar Road. These are, and you are from Quetta, so you feel these things. So is Ambassador Qazi. So I think all of us feel these things quite, we're quite sensitive to this. But despite all of these things, the Pakistani sectarian divide is not tipped over. There's clearly, as I said earlier, there are Pakistanis who are pro-Iran, there's Pakistanis who are pro-Saudi, and maybe that is aligned with their sectarian beliefs, maybe not. But at the end of the day, who would you, I mean, clearly the armed forces and the state and institutions get some credit, but what other factors do you think there are that have kept Pakistan from falling into the abyss of a true sectarian war?
Well, I think you have said it, but major problem which Pakistan faced, especially after the 9/11, was Pakistan itself became a target of different, in fact, Sunni organizations like Retd, and they started targeting their own people. They were Pakistanis, or they were targeting the officials, whether law enforcement agencies and others. So, if the statistics are correct that we have lost 70,000 people, who were they? So predominantly they were Sunni people, but of course it was not sectarian, it was political. So it was political Islam which was in a militancy mode, and the result was in front of you. And still you are facing that dilemma. Thank God it's not sectarian, although there are sectarian organizations. But I think you have to give credit to the governments of the day, that they subsequently started coming down heavily on those organizations. I know for sure that Iran was told, quite frankly, that they have to rein in certain organizations. There were certain people who were not allowed to enter the country. So there have been a number of measures which were taken. And then same is true for the Saudi funded organizations. It may not be complete success, but there were steps were taken. And I think that was also a reason which substantially curbed their activities. Not fully, still they are working, but at the same time there have been a modest success.
Fantastic. Barney, 30 seconds to a minute, and then because originally I had planned we would have a long discussion but then Ambassador Qazi came and stole the show, and so now we have very little time. But Barnett, 30 seconds before we go to the audience.
Before I do that, I just want to clarify something from you. You've asked for advice for Pakistan, right? So if I offer advice for Pakistan, I'm not coming here and lecturing you, I'm answering your question, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so let me...
Arnie is not lecturing Pakistan. Don't take any offense. He's
You can be
a good man.
That's all right. But Qazi Saab said Pakistan's problem is that it became a security state rather than a developmental state. Ambassador Durrani said, don't tie your relations to other countries to their positions on Kashmir or their positions on India. We should be dehyphenated. I'd like to put these two together to deal with the issue of dependence. Why is Pakistan so dependent? Pakistan is so dependent because the top priority of the Pakistani state is to build and maintain a security establishment that the country cannot afford. And that makes... That is the way that Pakistan national security establishment has defined the national interest with respect to India. If you don't solve that problem, Pakistan will remain dependent.
Okay. I have an answer, if you'll allow me. I think that it would help if we didn't have a neighbor that was trying to consume us. And I don't know if you've checked the news lately, but India is not exactly sending us rose petals and peace missiles. On that note, I have this debate back and forth. On that note, we want to bring in, well, that's great, but we want to bring in young people first. We have very little time. You're going to keep it short, otherwise I'm going to cut you off. We'll start over there. He was wearing the white shirt, so he's just more prominent. 15 seconds. Quickly with your name. Start with your name. Ucha bol le yaar, awaaz aa jayegi.
My name is Saruddin Khan and I'm from Government College University, Lahore. I have two questions from Ambassador Durrani.
You get to ask one question.
Okay, so last Thursday when President Trump spoke after Iran attacked their military bases in Iraq, he called on not take a more active role in the Middle East. So do you envision any kind of redefinition of the geopolitical map in the Middle East? And my second question is...
No, but just one question, sorry. There's a lot of people that want to ask questions. We're going to come here. Take the mic over there. Don't start asking the question. Barney, that question was for you. Do you want to answer it? Sorry, that was for you. Go ahead.
I will repeat my question.
Redefinition of the geopolitical map in the Middle East.
Well, President Trump is a maverick, but I'm happy that he de-escalated, and I'm happy that Iran was pragmatic also. They retaliated, but they did not cause any human casualties. So that's how it was de-escalated. But if you're talking about the new map, it all depends how the actors in the Middle East they act. And the United States is not in a position, I don't know what you mean by new map. Right now the map is quite ugly.
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
That's a good answer. The young man in the black jacket.
Sir, I'm Asif from Punjab University, moving away from the oversimplified reasons for poor governance in the
Who is the question for?
So, Mr. Ambassador.
This one.
This man. Sir, don't you think it's a part of well-contrived plan between US and Iran as a result of win-win situation for both in the unfolding of recent episodes? For example, the US killed Soleimani and the Iranis retaliated in the form of practically no US losses. And at the end of the day, Jawad Zarif, I heard saying that we are ready for negotiation, but on our conditions. And Donald Trump not only welcoming the stance, but also sort of hailing to put certain trade restrictions on Iran too. Don't you think it's a win-win situation for both? And
Good. Got your question.
Pakistan is being
Is it a win-win situation?
on the very basis of politics.
Well, for the time being, win-win, but I think stalemate continues. So the situation remains precarious, and I think there will be extra effort required to calm down the situation. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go here.
So my question is from Rubin.
Barney Rubin.
Certain quarter are of the opinion that the exit of the US forces would lead to the division of Afghanistan along ethnic line, because Taliban, despite all their shortcomings, are the sole representative of the Muslim population. Such scenario will have a balkanization effect on the whole region, especially from Sinkiang, Kashmir, Pakistan, Balochistan, Iran, and Iraq. Second question is
Just one question. Just one question. Barnett.
I had a little difficulty hearing the question on what conditions would Afghanistan be partitioned on ethnic lines. The answer is, in my view, there is no conceivable situation in which Afghanistan can be partitioned on ethnic lines. Because no one would agree on who would control Kabul. And by the way, the Taliban are not only in the Pashtun areas in the past years. Much of their effort has been in northern Afghanistan. They're very active in the Tajik province of Badakhshan and so on. So there's a lot of ethnic conflict in Afghanistan, but it cannot be resolved by partition, and it will not lead to partition.
Thank you, Barney. Madam.
Sir, I'm Nikhat. I'm a professional trained in the United States and really appreciate what they do as an individual person. But as a country, I think I would say that why don't they stay out of Middle East, and why are they interfering in every country in the region? And I think...
Who is that question for, madam?
For Barney.
For Barney. Why are you interfering in every...
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Okay.
And why are you not supporting the international
Just one question.
laws and rights?
Just one question. Why are you all over in the Middle East, and why aren't you supporting human rights, Barney? What's wrong with you?
Well, look, first of all, of course, I'm not here representing the government of the United States. And if you want to know why the United States is not behaving, is not basing its policy on international law and respect for human rights, I respectfully ask you to study the behavior of every other great power in the history of the world.
Okay. Young gentleman over here in the black jacket. No, right there. Yeah, he had his hand up first. Sorry, bro.
Hello everyone, my name is Asif and I am just graduated from UAT Texla. And my question is to General Sahab. General Sahab, we see Pakistan has been doing reactive foreign policy instead of proactive foreign policy in the region, and the reason I see is because our foreign policy has been Indian-centric in the most way. Are we paranoid as a nation that we see India is going to eat us or what? Because let's be fair, we are not a cup of cake because we have a nuclear power and all. Or should we move to the as one of the panelists said, we move towards the geo-economic state from the geo-security state?
Thank you. Excellent question. Two foreign service officers, both ambassadors on the panel. Foreign policy question for the general. Sir.
No, I'm not going to talk about diplomacy, but I think he's asked a good question in the sense that, and it also probably flows from what Barney and Ambassador Qazi said. I think obviously security establishment always remains a favorite whipping boy of everybody. I think we need to understand, it's amazing that we tend to lose sight of history when we talk of why is Pakistan a security state, why is security establishment doing this and that. First of all, let me assure you that since I've been in the army for 40 years, so I can speak for that institution in the sense that there has never been an occasion that Pakistan Army or the security establishment, so to speak, has said that we don't want peace with India. That is number one. Number two is, I think a lot of our country people, our own countrymen tend to forget our own history. After partition, if you look at the steps taken by the Indians against your own country, starting from stoppage of aid to stoppage of water, and then we went to 3 wars, there is a history of conflict between the two countries. We have fought wars, and if the people of this country and the government of this country think that the size of the security establishment needs to be cut down, they can always take that decision. Nobody stops them from doing that, but they haven't done so. And one, you might want to understand and realize, why did the political leadership of this country, they're all educated people, why did they cut down the size of the security establishment or the armed forces if they thought everything was very good in this country and we don't face any threat from either the western borders or the eastern borders? That is
just to tell people that it's the decision of the government to take, not the security establishment itself to cut it down. That's as far as India is concerned, yes, we should have peace with India. Who says we don't want to have peace with India? But I think we also need to understand it works both ways. Have the Indians taken any step to have good relations with Pakistan?
Excellent.
And my panelists who are diplomats will probably let you know I may be wrong, but what my information is that it has always been, every time it has been the Indians who have started the talks, not Pakistan. And I can give you an example of, for example, a small issue of Siachen conflict. Everything was decided, it was the Indian army actually which put its foot down. And its political leadership had to listen to its army of scuttling that agreement which actually had almost taken place. And you can go back to Agra, you can go back to other. Just we have done a lot of things which perhaps we should not have done in terms of relationship with both the countries. But the Indians have also done a lot of things which did not augur well for peace between the two countries. So I think it works both ways. It is unfortunate that we always blame ourselves for not having good relations with India and tend to forget what the Indians are doing to their relations.
Got it, sir. That's a comprehensive answer. I'm coming to you first, the young man here, then we'll take the second question here, then we'll come back and start with Qazi Saab.
I am Ashraf. I come from Durrani and my question is from Qazi Saab. Sir, what do you think, which one between Saudi Arabia and Iran, or which country would China like us to choose and why?
Okay, great question. Very well done. I'll translate the question. Let's just take this one as well.
My name is Nawaz, and my question is for Waheed sir. A couple of days ago, in the perspective of General Usmani's murder and General Soleimani's murder, Trump's cabinet minister ran up our army chief, and Kamal Javed's response was highly apologetic, just the way your opinion was apologetic on this subject a few minutes ago. Why Pakistani generals are so apologetic to American administration? Always. Why?
Okay. So, Qazi Saab, the question that the young man asked was, and we'll come to you.
The mayor should be directly elected. And
sorry, what's happening?
I disagree with this.
Sorry,
this notion.
I can't. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. Who's speaking? Oh, yeah, no, hold on. Qazi Saab is going to say his piece. You're going to respond, Qazi Saab, to the question. Sawal ye tha ki who do you think the Chinese would like us to choose between Iran and Saudi Arabia? It's a great question.
Maybe a very great question, but I mean, it's a lot of question. And China, let me tell you.
Sir, mic on there.
Questions are all the Lord. Hello? Is it? China is not in the business of making other countries to take choices and all. It has not done this with Pakistan, that you be friends with such and such a country and friends with another country. In fact, the exact opposite. China has said, we have differences, we China have differences with the United States, but you need a relationship with the United States because they can offer you many things that we can't. We're still a developing country. All China has asked of Pakistan is, do not allow yourself to be used by any other country against Chinese interests. That's all they've asked for. And it's one reason why the Chinese are very popular with decision makers and even with the people in Pakistan, although now there is a new narrative coming up which is aimed at alienating the Pakistani people, our own people, from China. Pakistani hai yahan, too many Chinese here, they're taking over, they're going to sink us in debt, they're going to do what they did in Sri Lanka, and even that is also misrepresented. So, I mean, so China is not going to tell us, because China, let me tell you that China has been an example of economic developments over the past 30 odd years, such as the history, in modern history, has not been seen. They have almost delivered 1 billion people from the clutches of life below the poverty line, which is the greatest single contribution to human rights in the modern history of man. So, I mean, let us not underestimate China.
Excellent.
Now, Pakistan needs to follow this example by having a peaceful neighborhood as far as is possible. And you have been right to say India makes it very difficult for Pakistan, because India's policies, India's hegemonistic policies, etc., and all. But it should be Pakistan's first priority, despite these difficulties, to bring about as good a neighborhood as peace in the neighborhood. Without peace in the neighborhood, you cannot develop. Without developing, you cannot be fair to 85% of your population. This country is being led by an extraordinarily small minority of people.
Qazi, we're being asked now. I've got Yaqub Bangash sending me messages and he's threatening me. And I'm just letting everyone know that Yaqub Bangash is threatening me. Jal Sahab, I'm more scared of Yaqub than I am of you, but you only get 30 seconds for the final response to Nawaz Sahab.
I'm not sure what the Secretary of Defense of USA said to the Chief of Army Staff, but the fact remains he called the Chief of Army Staff and he called the Prime Minister also, he called the Foreign Minister also, I'm sure. Whatever was discussed in the call, it's not public. I don't know what, except for the statement of the ISPI. I can't comment on what has been discussed because I don't know what was discussed. But let me assure you, as a former general, nobody from Pakistan, whether a general or a political leader, is generally apologetic to the United States. Nothing we say what we want to say. There are ways of saying things. One doesn't have to slap and say something. You can always say something without slapping somebody also. So whatever our perspective in terms of military to military relationship or our relationship between the two countries, I think whether it's the Foreign Office or the military or anybody else, I think they're very upfront and direct when they convey their point of view to not only to the Americans, but anybody else. I think that's the way it is.
On that note, let me just stand up and applaud this fantastic panel for their candor and their openness and willingness to answer questions. You've been a fantastic audience, great questions all around, especially by the young people. Thank you very much.